Hey y'all, welcome to That Tennessee Feeling. Thanks for coming back for another month. I hope everybody's doing good. It is officially summer. I know we all had a rough spring with the storms and tornadoes, and we've had a zebra sighting. I mean, Tennessee is just Tennessee, although I'm glad they got the zebra. But it is never boring to live in Tennessee, y'all. Ever. Thanks to y'all who've gone on the social media pages, the likes, the shares. I appreciate it, y'all. There is a TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it still. If you want to see what's going on with the podcast, check out what I've posted, reposted. If you want to suggest a topic, you want to just say hi, you want to see how I feel about Tennessee or Old Nashville or Knoxville, Chattanooga, Memphis. I've been everywhere. If I could sing, I would sing that song, but I'm not. And every now and then I do post recipes. Big on Southern cooking. Love me some cast iron. I do own a lot of lodge. But no, I appreciate y'all. I appreciate you coming back and listening. Those of you who are falling in love with Tennessee, welcome. Those of you who've been around a while, like me, you know. And those of you who just like to pass through from time to time, there are cities out there other than Gatlinburg. I just had to say it. I said what I said. So today I'm going to actually talk about something I get asked about a lot as a Tennessean. And I've actually been. I get asked if it exists. It does exist. I've been. I always get asked, have I been? Yes, I've been. Is it gross? Depends on how you look at it. Why is it there? It is a much needed resource, which I'll explain in a minute. And do they actually keep parts of it under the stadium? I'm not going to answer that one. Now, if you have deducted anything from any of those questions, then you probably know what I'm talking about. If you don't, I'm talking about University of Tennessee's Anthropological Research Facility, aka the Body Farm. The University of Tennessee Anthropological Research Facility, otherwise known as the Body Farm, and sometimes the Forensic Anthropological, I cannot say that word. I did so good on the first two. Anthropology Facility was actually conceived in 1971 and officially established in 1972 by anthropologist William M. Bass, who is an amazing human being. It was actually the first facility of its kind to study decomposition of human remains. If you do not want to hear about this, come back next month. The facility is actually located just a few miles from downtown Knoxville. It sits right next to University of Tennessee. It's right near the river. I'm not going to tell you where. But it sits right behind UT Medical. So if you've ever been to the hospital, you're really close to it. That's all I'm going to tell you. And it is part of the Forensic Anthropology Center. And it was established officially, everything was officially established fully by Dr. Basson in 1987. The idea was conceived in the 70s, officially established in the 80s, and has been going ever since. The facility is about 2.5 acres of a wooded plot. It is surrounded by a razor wire fence. You are not just going to get in. You're not, for many reasons. This is not one of those grotesque, I want to go see dead bodies. That's not okay. Do not walk up on it. They're not going to let you in. In fact, they're going to tell you to leave. If you don't leave, you're going to get the cops called on you. Saw it happen once. And basically what happens at the Body Farm is that the bodies are donated. First of all, let's start there. It is not a grave robbing thing. I got asked that one time. Do they just go take bodies? No. These are donated to science. This is all for science. This is completely science. But bodies are donated, and then they're placed in different settings throughout the facility. And the reason they do this is as they decompose, they are exposed in a number of ways to provide insights on decomposition. And the reason for that is as they decompose under various conditions, it lends a scientific research on how it happens. Does a body decompose faster underground? Does it decompose faster in a car? indirect sunlight, indirect heat, in non-direct heat, underwater, out of water. And these are all the things that they study at the body farm. And of course, the facility has expanded from just 20 exposed bodies in 2003 to around 150 in 2007. So it has grown, and the need for it has grown also. This is actually something that's helped out in a lot of cases. The Anthropological Research Facility, which was the first body farm actually ever created, right there in Knoxville, Tennessee, was founded by Bass to generate information about what a corpse experiences when it is exposed to various experimental conditions. It is literally all scientific research. On the farm, human corpses yield to the elements. They're the elements of nature in many reenacted scenes, such as car accidents that could be unseen for days, murder victims buried in shallow graves, cremations that weren't fully done correctly, people just left out to the elements in, say, a hiking accident. It's just there's just so many different variables, and they have studied a lot of these. And prior to the creation of this institution, y'all, no advances has really been made in the study of long-term body decomposition since the days of Song Sai in the 13th century China. You went from the 1200 ADs to literally the 1970s, y'all. It's a long time. And now many, many advances have been made about how to determine postmortem decomposition, like the intervals of decomposition due to this body farm. So where did he get the idea to create such a body farm? Well, in 1966, Dr. Bass was teaching at the University of Kansas. And he got the first idea for what would eventually become the body farm when he was asked if it was possible to determine the time of death of a decomposed cow. Just a cow, random cow. And he actually determined from that question that additional research would be needed to accomplish this. Because you can't just walk out and look at a decomposing cow and determine really a lot. You don't know how it died. You don't know what's touched it. You don't know how long it's been there. You'd have to look at things. And he suggested that such knowledge could be determined by allowing a deceased cow to decompose in a field and then observe that process. And that's where the idea came from. Bass further realized that additional research was needed into the field of human decomposition when he was actually summoned in December of 1977 to examine what was first assumed to be a murder victim buried on top of the grave of a Confederate soldier in Franklin, Tennessee, who had been killed at the Battle of Nashville in 1864. So basically, he was called out to a scene in 1977 after someone had been buried on top of a Confederate soldier from over 100 years ago. And they found this person who had been buried, and the body was actually relatively still intact. And it actually had most of the flesh on it. So it was new. It wasn't from 1864. Because let's face it, when people were killed in 1864 during the Civil War, there was no doing anything to them. They were not going to preserve them. There was no formaldehyde. There was you had to put them in the ground because so many people died. So this was not a Confederate soldier that they had found. And Dr. Bass initially estimated that the body had been dead for maybe less than a year. But examination of the clothes determined that the body was actually the soldier buried in the grave. That's right. It was the soldier. It was determined that grave robbers had actually recently punctured the soldier's coffin, which had been made of cast iron. And cast iron had sealed it airtight, which had actually preserved the body as if it had been preserved in today's times, which had prevented the decomposition. But when they punctured it, it removed the body, therefore reburying it on top of the coffin. So what looked like something that had possibly been dead for a year, someone that had been possibly been dead for a year, it was found to be the soldier from 1864. And, speaking on what we know of the Civil War, they didn't really have time to bury people like that. But this soldier had. This soldier had been taking the time to be given a proper burial in an cast iron coffin, which is even more rare, and sealed, preserving this body so well that he looked like he'd only been dead for about a year. And that really got Dr. Bass thinking, something's got to be done. Studies need to be done because that was way wrong. That was way off. So during the 1970s, donated and unclaimed bodies were kind of like macerated up. So basically they were put into scientific research, better way to put that, at an abandoned farm owned by the university, which was on the property. University of Tennessee owns a lot of land, y'all, whether you realize that or not. I mean, they own a lot of land from where the university sits all the way down 129, all the way through Alcoa. A lot of Knoxville is actually owned by University of Tennessee. But in the 1970s, they started to do this research. And when the body farm officially began in the early 1980s, Bass had been in position of the head of anthropology department for the University of Tennessee for about a decade. So he'd been, there since the 1970s. And he had already been appointed as the first state forensic anthropologist of Tennessee. So he'd already been in this role, and he'd already thought of what he wanted to do, and he'd already kind of been working on this body farm before it was officially established. And as the state's forensic anthropologist, Bass was officially called on to determine cause of time of death in cases. So he was already well prepared for this role and to establish this body farm. So in the fall of 1980, Bass began building his faculty, and he did so with a small group of students. His initial institution consisted of a fenced-off 256 square foot slab of concrete with a small windowless shed on top. The shed held tools and surgical instruments that they would use to conduct their research. A front porch that measured only 160 square feet was reserved as a spot to lay bodies out for decomposition and studies. Man, you could imagine if somebody walked up on this not expecting this. On May 15th, 1981, the facility received its first official donated research subject. Now, remember, before that, they had unclaimed bodies. This was the first official donated subject. A 73-year-old man who had died of emphysema and heart disease, labeled as 1-81. First subject of 1981. For confidentiality, Bass' first research subject provided information on the 4 stages that occurred during decomposition for a human body. Bass uses this naming convention, the designated number of the body and the year it was obtained, specifically just for research subjects. That way it creates confidentiality, and it keeps the people from the family from like finding out how the body officially decomposed if anybody went through research cases. That way it keeps the people from feeling worse. But specifically for donated research subjects, he uses that kind of the way to name them. Bass uses reverse convention, year, and number for real-world cases he works. So if he's actually out in the field having to work something, it would have been 81/1. But if it's research for students, it's 1-81. That way he doesn't get them mixed up. Bill Rodriguez, one of Bass's actual graduate students, wrote his doctoral thesis on the information gathered from this actual facility. During the facility's first year of operation, Rodriguez conducted a study where each day he observed and notated the presence of various insects on the human cadavers and other information like changes in the body, the timing of each of the changes versus the insects. Rodriguez made a bunch of interesting notes, but actually noted that blowflies immediately swarmed the carcass in his study and began mass producing eggs all over the opening of the body or orifices. But noted that other insects weren't attracted until the body began to rot, such as yellow jackets and wasps. That's really strange to me. I mean, I don't know. I did not expect wasps to be attracted to a corpse. I don't know why. But once the blowfly eggs began to turn into maggots, other insects soon began to follow. As many other insects began to feed on the body. Again, y'all, if you don't want to hear this, turn the episode off. It's only going to get worse. Rodriguez also made interesting notes about the 4 stages of decomposition, which were systematically characterized in a scientific, orderly manner, beginning with 181, talking about the fresh stages with the insects, then also talking about how the skin made changes, talking about how the jaw and mandible stretched into a smile, then the hair and skin began to stretch as well. Then the body began entering a bloat stage within the first week. Then came the smell. Then, as it begins to dry out, it turns slowly into a skeleton, and that takes up to a month. Which is interesting because nobody really had done this research, y'all, to actually put this into writing. And it said that a full month passed before 181 entered the complete dry stage. It also stated that microbes and insects were the ones that officially consumed most of the soft tissue, and the sun dried out what was left on the bones. That's insane. Now, the body farm has grown a lot over the years, y'all. It started from that little tiny area. As of November of 2023, the body farm officially covers 2.5 acres of land. It is surrounded by razor wire and fences. And it goes to around 40 bodies that are studied at many different scenarios for the exact same research, kind of like what Mr. Rodriguez wrote about. The information gathered by studying how the body decomposes due to digestive enzymes, bacteria, and insects is actually the most often used to determine the post-mortem interval as to what stage the body was in when it was found, either due to car wrecks, murders, or various other reasons. And this is really big in law enforcement, y'all, because knowing the length of time that has passed since death really helps to reconcile the information gathered at a crime scene, because it's useful in telling alibis for suspects. It's useful in recreating the moments leading up to how the person died, what caused the person to officially die, if there were animals in the area that got to the person, things like that. And the information is often a critical detail, and it can invalidate false alibis. It can lead to convictions. It's actually also been used to find species that they thought were extinct. Many different things can happen thanks to this research. The body farm has also been crucial because since 2000, the FBI has sent evidence response team agents to the facility, of course, to gain training in clandestine grave recoveries and excavations. Basically, the FBI has been using the body farm as a training resource for a very, very long time. Now, Mr. Bass and his students do not isolate themselves through their own studies at the body farm. They actually take on cases, y'all, from law enforcement where they can lend their expertise. So Mr. Bass was the state, forensic examiner, but his students, because it's for graduate students usually, they actually go out and help as well as part of the course, which I think is amazing. And that's actually kind of how I got to be in part of this program. But they receive cases in law enforcement, and they get to go out. And one such case actually was 91-23. So it was an arson case that involved a car on the border of Tennessee. And after using various other forensics on the body, including bone examinations, Bass and his team were able to actually identify the victim. But the other question was, how long ago had the victim died? So, using all the expertise they had, they turned to entomology, and more specifically, flies. They looked at the life cycle of a fly. And I know this doesn't seem interesting to some of y'all, but having a law enforcement background like myself, y'all, this is very interesting to me. I know. And I don't like bugs, but it's very interesting when it comes to stuff like this. And two of Mr. Bass's graduate students actually collected maggots and like larvae from the scene and took them back to the body farm to study. And after a lot of testing and observation, they appeared to be charred from the same fire that brought an end to the car and the body. They were able to figure out that this was major evidence and that the man had been dead in his car for the entire life cycle of a blowfly, which is about 2 weeks, y'all, before the fire was even set. So, because of this, Mr. Bass and his team were able to determine an actual cause of death, which helped place authorities in the right direction to find his murderers. All because of a fly, y'all. They found out who killed this man. That's right, a fly. But that's not the only case they've helped out on. Another case was in 1981. A man named Alan Gell was granted an appeal to his earlier conviction for the murder of another man, Alan Ray Jenkins. Gell's attorney, Mary Pollard, actually needed assistance in finding the post-mortem interval on the victim to be able to clear Mr. Gell. And with this, she turned to Murray Marks, which was actually one of the forensic anthropologists who worked at the body farm under Dr. Bass. Now, Marks was actually a specialist in corpse decomposition, and he used a measurement known as degree days, which actually utilizes temperature and crime scene photos of the maggots to determine accurate range of dates for possible deaths. So basically, they look at maggots and temperatures to decide which days this person could have died. And this information placed the time of death in such a range that it was actually impossible for Gell to be the murderer of Jenkins. That's right. Maggots helped get this man off. Again, something you would expect. Now, one of the more recent cases that they worked on, y'all, was in 2007. Bass actually agreed to exhume the body of the late J.P. Richardson Jr. Do you know that name? You might know him as the Big Bopper. He was one of 3 musicians that actually died in a plane crash in February of 1959, y'all. But his son, Jay Richardson, had never met his father. And knowing the strange controversy surrounding the plane crash, he wanted to contact Bass because he wanted some answers. He thought it was always strange about how it all went down. And questions always lingered if Buddy Holly's gun found at the scene of the crash had been fired earlier, or if Richardson had managed to survive the initial crash and just died trying to get away. Like something never sat right with him. And it's always that if you have a gut feeling, you should trust it, right? Well, he did. So, after the exhumation of the body of the Big Bopper, Bass examined it using a portable x-ray system. And after x-rays, Bass was able to come to the conclusion that Richardson had died immediately upon impact. He showed Jay Richardson numerous breaks and fractures throughout his father's body, which included chest, skull, pelvis, and legs, which would have inhibited ambulatory motion, which basically would have meant that he would have died at the scene. So basically, all the rumors and debates surrounding Richardson's death could finally be put to rest. And it was due largely in part to Bass and his extensive knowledge of forensic anthropology that the Big Bopper's son was able to get conclusive answers about his father's death. And I think that's really cool that he agreed to help his son, that he helped the Big Bopper's son get, a little peace of mind. But of course, Mr. Bass has done a lot in just the work of anthropology outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. The collaboration of Mr. Bass and John Jefferson began in Tennessee, but it's gone through international boundaries. Their association, studies, and publications have actually done a lot through journalistic accomplishments, including some which have led the authors under the pseudonyms Jefferson Bass, because why not just, put your names together. And this union actually signifies the strength of their partnership. Through the Bass's establishment of the body farm and the published studies, There's actually been a ton of new understandings in the breakdown of the human body, y'all. These studies have actually enriched the knowledge of the decomposition of a body and the effects of the environment. And it's kind of led to the enhanced use of forensic science in criminal investigations. And it's actually led to a lot of convictions being overturned. It has led to a lot of people not being convicted when years ago they would have been. It's been a lot of cases reopened. And it's gotten a lot. It's great that it's come a lot further than it used to be. All because of the body farm sitting in Knoxville, Tennessee. And of course, the body farm is going to continue to evolve. The researchers at the Anthropological Research Facility always are identifying new methods to calculate post-mortem interval. They also work on body identification and other variables that might aid in criminal investigations. Time of death in a homicide case can make the difference between bringing criminals to justice, solving a cold case, and making sure that an innocent person is not convicted. And this has really been the main focus of the body farm since it was opened. Of course, with the progression of research, Bass has always been hopeful that in the future, entomologists will be able to declare time of day within a half a day, which is really good. But it makes it a difficult task to accomplish that because literally every minute that passes after death, y'all, the time of range that can correctly estimate the time of body just drastically broadens. Because there's so many factors. Temperature, weather, which temperature and weather are not the same thing, y'all, I promise. Animals, insects, shade, direct sunlight. Like there's so many things that go into figuring that out. The body farm's success over the past 36 years, actually longer than that now. I was using an old source for this one, sorry. Over the past many years, is directly responsible for a large amount of overwhelming progress in narrowing that range down. Used to they could do it within a couple days. Now they're getting really close. And of course, last time Mr. Bass was asked about the body farm's future, he insinuated that right now it's small and he would like to move it to a bigger area. He always wants to continue the body farm and make it a bigger area. But a higher percent of land areas that is not being contaminated by other burials, is his future achievement. He has proposed the need for more territory on the University of Tennessee grounds and or outside the area of the University of Tennessee. The university is granted the ARF, which is the Anthropological Research Facility, at least 12 acres in addition to the 2.5. So they are growing. It continues to grow. The problem with Tennessee, y'all, is that there is a lot of Indian burials. There's also a lot of Confederate and Union burials. There's a lot of unknown factors. There's also a lot of limestone. It's just, you never know what you're going to get when you're digging. I remember when we lived towards Nashville and we found random Civil War artifacts in our backyard in Wilson County, y'all. So it's really strange. You really just never know what you're going to find. But, and Mr. Bass realizes that. And so that's one thing that he understands, especially in the body farm, especially expanding it area-wise. But of course, when the body farm really first started, people were not sure about it. And public opinion was not great for it because before programs like CSI, there was a lot of protest and a lot of controversy that surrounded it because people thought it was grotesque. They thought it was barbaric. They thought it insulted the dead. They thought it was really unnecessary to just leave a body out, y'all, to let it decompose. They thought it wasn't right. They thought it was against Christian practices. They thought the people doing it were not right. They didn't realize, they just couldn't wrap their head around that this was for a scientific purpose. But thanks to programs like CSI or NCIS or any of those programs that are law enforcement based, it has really kind of helped people come to terms with this is something that the public needs to do in terms of research. And as a result, the number of people that are willing to donate their bodies after passing is actually gone up. And more people are just kind of accepting it, or actually even wanting to get into that field. And there's been, a lot of advancements, and there's been a lot more people willing to do it. But of course, identifying skeletal remains is still a very sensitive subject, even at the farm. That's something that still remains a huge kind of topic. Even with the new age and generation, there's been kind of a shift in methods to identifying skeletal remains. And even with all the changes and adaptations, the ability to identify property in bone matter that has been buried since the beginning of the forensic anthropology database that was actually founded in 1986 in the University of Texas. So yeah, the Forensic Anthropology Databank was actually founded in 1986 at the University of Texas, and it houses thousands, and I mean thousands and thousands and thousands of detailed measurements of skeletons. And they do that for many reasons, mostly for anthropology, lots of research. But that data provides strong evidence that shows differences in ethnic backgrounds from ancient times to today, how humans are changing, shifting. But along with that data bank, a lot of the innovations have given researchers a computer tool called 4DISC. And the program can be used to evaluate subtleties in bone samples, which is a much smaller scale that can confirm or challenge theories and conclusions drawn by investigators that have to do with genetics, DNA, and other things. And that is where they're kind of running into sensitivities. And that's where you have a problem with certain things being identified in skeletal remains. And that's still the sensitive subject that's happening now. But, that doesn't mean that that's not going to be something that changes in future studies. Speaking of future studies, the Body Farm is also studying the compounds released by corpses after burial. If a person is reported missing, the authorities right now can search for missing entities using canine units. But we don't really know what the canine specifically smells for, like what activates it. And researchers are trying to figure that out. They've confirmed that the dead body actually gives off over 400 compounds as it decomposes. So what compound is a canine actually smelling? Or what mixture? And that's what they're also starting to kind of study, which is very interesting. And due to the start of this study and kind of the success of this research, they're trying to recreate these smells to better train these dogs on exactly what to search for. And they're trying to do this to make the dogs way more effective in homicide cases and to find these missing bodies faster, to bring these murderers to justice faster for the families, which is a great new study that they've been working on. Now, you're probably wondering how the Body Farm continues to get bodies. They don't pay for them, and they're not grave robbers like we've established. So how do they get them? They still rely on donations. Can you donate now? Yes. You can go to the University of Tennessee's Anthropological website. There is actually a packet you can fill out to donate a body. And you can donate to this day, y'all. Donating a person's body after death will ensure that research continues. And 30 to 50 bodies are donated each year. It's not a hugely high number, but they are donated. There is a policy, though, to establish certain guidelines. There are guidelines you have to follow. Like, once a body has been donated, the remains will not be returned to a family as a skeleton. The skeleton is actually placed in the skeletal collection. Like, the family doesn't get back the skeleton to bury. The family doesn't get back anything. It's just been donated. That's it. And the bodies which were infected by disease such as HIV and MRSA can only be donated if first cremated. Yes, you can still cremate a body and donate it, and that is actually still useful. You do have to fill out pre-donation paperwork prior to a body being transported to the facility. So, if that's something you're now interested in, that's awesome. They're still looking for this. They rely heavily on donations. So go to the University of Tennessee Anthropological Facilities website. Look at it. Fill it out. See if it's something you want to do. Go for it. Now, we've talked a lot about the body farm and that it's in UT and what it does, but who is Dr. Bass that founded it? Let's talk about him for a second. He's not officially from Tennessee, but it feels like he is because he's been there long enough and he's done so much at UT and for Tennessee. Dr. Bass attended Hampton-Sydney College before transferring his junior year to the University of Virginia for his undergraduate degree in psychology. He was a scholar at the U.S. Army Medical Research Laboratory from 1953 to 54, where he studied psychophysiology. I think I said that right. Big word. He received his master's from the University of Kentucky in 1956. He just goes to all the schools we are not a fan of. And he completed his PhD in anthropology from the University of Pennsylvania in 1961. His research really began as an archaeologist excavating Native American grave sites in the Midwest during the latter 50s and 60s. He actually mentions in Death's Acre that an activity earned him the informal title Indian Grave Robber #1 from an Indian activist. I don't know that I want that nickname. He did mention, though, that no actual clashes with Native Americans ever occurred. That's a good thing. He did work briefly at the University of Kansas and Nebraska during this time, but he was officially hired by University of Tennessee in 1971 to head their anthropology department, which was in the process of being split from the history department at that time. So he got the job because they were creating the new department and they needed someone to head it up. Again, he got the idea for what would eventually become the body farm while he was at the University of Kansas when asked if it was possible to determine the time of death for a partially decomposed cow. He decided that additional research would be needed because they needed to let a cow decompose in a field and watch the process. That experiment was never actually conducted, but Bass realized that additional research on human decomposition was needed when he was summoned in 1977, thinking that there was a recent murder victim that had been buried on top of that grave of a Confederate soldier in Franklin, Tennessee, who had actually been killed in the Battle of Nashville in 1864. Again, due to the fact that the body was in really good condition and still containing most of its flesh, thinking the body had been dead for less than a year, he realized he had made a large error when they realized that after examining the actual coffin and the clothing, that it was actually the soldier that had died in 1864. I just want to know, by the way, side note, who is robbing a grave that late? Like, seriously. Who decided in 1977 to rob a grave from 1864? Like, what are you doing? I mean, I think I know probably what they were doing. They were probably looking for that lost gold. But, like, really? What are you doing? Sorry. Okay, sorry. Sorry. Like, really, y'all? Okay, back to Bass. He started the university's Anthropological Research Facility officially in 1980, which was the world's first. So he did the first. He then actually officially established the University Forensic Anthropology Center in 1987. Most of Bass's research has been on osteology and human decomposition, and Bass's research has always been along with his graduate students, and they have made many advances in their field, mostly on how to determine the cause and time of death, based on the conditions in which the death took place. His research has actually formed the basis of the techniques used by medical examiners, forensic pathologists, homicide detectives, and other law enforcement personnel in post-mortem investigations. Basically, he wrote the book on it. Later, he also began researching cremation. In addition to his research, Bass has also assisted law enforcement in forensic investigations. He's investigated many multiple high-profile cases, including the 1983 Benton firework disaster. I remember reading about that. That was awful. That was awful, y'all. The tri-state crematory scandal. Ooh, I remember that. Yeah, that was when the guy was supposed to be cremating people from like Chattanooga and Georgia and all around that area, and he wasn't, and he just had bodies laying everywhere. And he was that. Oh, that was bad. I remember that, y'all. He also did the 2000 exhumation of the Big Bopper that I mentioned earlier in the episode. Now, Bass is the third generation in his family to have an educational building named after him. The William M. Bass III Forensic Anthropology Building dedication ceremony happened in September of 2011 near the Body Farm. Mr. Bass does have an interesting private life. He's been married 3 times. He met his first wife, Mary Anna, whom he met while doing research for the Army in 1953. She unfortunately died of colon cancer in 1993. His second marriage was in 1994 to Annette Blackburn, who died in 1997 from lung cancer. And later he married Carol Lee Hicks, who had been his friend since childhood. They're currently still married. It is interesting to note he does have 3 sons, and he was a devout Christian most of his life, but he is now an atheist. I don't know if I wonder if his research has done that to him. I did get to meet him. He is a very interesting man. He is a wealth of knowledge in this field. He has just basically written the book on, time of death research, y'all, and forensics. And, basically anybody who ever works a homicide case basically owes him on how you determine time of death. And, he's very interesting to listen to. He really is. And he built a very, very good, well-run, very interesting kind of program for the University of Tennessee. A couple fun facts about this, about the program. Forensic anthropology is actually the field that studies the human skeleton to aid in law enforcement. In doing so, forensic anthropology can estimate the age, sex, ancestry, and stature of human remains, as well as estimate the time of death and interpret any trauma to said skeleton. The Forensic Anthropology Center is unique in its field by having both a body donation program, which we talked about and how to do it, and the original Body Farm. Our anthropology research facility, the ARF, is the oldest and first established facility of its kind. Dr. William M. Bass, finding that there was a need to understand the process of human decomposition, officially founded the ARF in the 1970s. Knowing how a human body decomposes allows us to estimate how long someone has been dead. Time since death is one of the first things investigators often try to figure out, since it then helps in identifying the perpetrator and said victim. The research conducted at the ARF ranges from general observations on how a cadaver decomposes to high technology research, including DNA, microbes, isotopes, and other genetic research. Some of the more recent projects working on include testing hair and facial recognition programs. The University of Arizona, which does isotopes and geographic residence for testing. Office of Chief Medical Examiner and International Commission of Missing Persons also uses it. They try to determine the degradation of DNA and the ability to extract DNA from decomposing remains. Lincoln Memorial University, as well as the facilities at Sam Houston University, use the same stuff. Colorado Mesa and Texas State University do microbial research for that and decomposition. The ARF also does research and development with national laboratories, particularly Oak Ridge, which is just down the road. They also work with private industries. They also perform simulated case studies for law enforcement. They also use their master's and doctoral students to conduct independent research relating to their thesis. It's a huge facility. It's not huge in the sense that it takes up a lot of space. It's huge as in its outreaches. It works with a lot of different agencies, y'all. The University of Tennessee Knoxville donated skeletal collection is one of the largest collections of modern people in the United States. Basically, it is one of the best ways to study skeletons of the modern population. Most of the ones that are in use today for estimating age, sex, and ancestry were developed from collections from the late 19th century, as those were the ones available at the time that the forensic anthropology really began. And basically, since people have changed over the last century, it's really crucial to have access to these modern skeletons in order to develop new identification criteria that reflects on these changes. The skeletons are housed in perpetuity. In fact, the first donation received in 1981, that one 1981, using that very first case, is still in research today, y'all. There are over 1,800 individuals in the collection and average about 100 donations per year that are either pre-registered and have been donated by their families. The donors come from every state and multiple countries. The pre-donor program has over 4,000 individuals who have already chosen to donate prior to death. The individuals come from 50 states and 6 different countries representing all ages and ranges. All right, y'all. I know that the University of Tennessee is known for a lot of different things. We are known for being loud. Neyland Stadium is one of the loudest. We are known for Rocky Top. We are known for being in Knoxville, Tennessee. We are known for beating Alabama a couple years ago. But we're also known for having the first body farm. And this is something that people will always wonder about. And I always get asked about this, so I thought we'd finally talk about it. Hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. Now you know what the body farm is officially about. Hope it answers some questions, y'all. I'll see you next month. Stay country.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.